Venezuelans continue rallying, demanding the release of President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores, expressing their commitment to sovereignty and freedom in Venezuela. This Tuesday, February 3rd, citizens worldwide hold rallies and different activities in support of Venezuela a month after the U.S. invasion and kidnapping of President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. And on Monday, Cuba's National Assembly urged global parliamentarians to reject the extraterritorial measures imposed by the United States government against the Caribbean island. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. It's been a month since the U.S. Treasury's attack against Venezuela and the kidnapping of his constitutional president, Nicolás Maduro, and the First Lady and First Combatant, Cilia Flores. To give us more details about Washington's aggression and testimonies of some of the witnesses of that attack, as well as some Bolivarian government leaders, our correspondent Paola Dragnik brings us the first chapter of her series, The Signal of Victory.
The world was watching in silence a new form of criminal piracy. 20 weeks of continuous criminal siege and attacks in the high seas were not enough. At 1:58 in the morning of January 3rd, the missiles of the Empire hit Caracas, the gate to South America, an undeafening noise that brought to our continent the Gaza genocide and the certainty that the international law had died. It was an open fire against a nation that has only looked for its self-determination and dignity. Its supreme leader, Nicolás Maduro, was kidnapped and his bodyguards murdered.
Yo soñé con aviones que nublaban el día. Justo cuando la gente más cantaba y reía, más cantaba y reía.
Yes, just when people laughed and sang the most, because this was how the end of the year was lived in Venezuela, after a 2025 that, although besieged by the empire, had record growth figures.
Everybody's super happy. Everything is super, in order and peace. Everyone is having a great time. It's awesome. Because despite everything, despite sanctions, this year we had a quite considerable economic growth.
The country in peace, celebrating.
With Maduro forward, with Maduro forward. Maduro forward.
Forward and touring Caracas with Ignacio Ramonet on the very 31st of December.
Desde los emprendimientos más sencillos, la gente se fue a rehacer.
From the simplest business projects, people rebuilt their lives. Their countryside was restored. And they began to produce what was always said to be impossible, food for Venezuela: meat, milk, chicken, corn, rice, and so on.
All that was bought with the oil money.
Of course, the big flow of oil money distorted everything. We didn't choose to have a rentier model dependent of oil. When I was born in 1962, the capitalist-dependent oil rentier model had already been imposed, and we were a U.S. oil colony. What we did choose was to build the foundations to break the oil rentierism, to build another model, and Commander Chavez left us with the guidelines in his plans for the homeland. And we tried at the worst moment of the blockade that took away 99% of our oil revenues when nothing was being produced in Venezuela. When we could no longer import anything, we said to ourselves, let's move forward.
A Venezuela that rose strong, that knew how to open new roads, boosting its own economy and consolidating food autonomy, also generating the return of compatriots who came back to their land hopeful, with almost 50,000 communal councils in operation. The people of Venezuela had triumphed, and the empire could not tolerate it. The port of La Guaira, Higuerote, and Fortuna, points that could be seen in the distance, in the middle of the darkness. The first reports came from the Bolivarian armed forces.
After assessing the damage caused by the criminal attack, the terrorist attack against our people, against our homeland, against electrical facilities, against the Bolivarian Revolution, and even against those who have nothing to do with the Bolivarian Revolution, it is an attack against Venezuela, against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
In this unfortunate hour, I invoke the courage we inherited from the liberators, who taught us that dignity is not negotiable and that the homeland is a supreme value. They attacked us, but they will not bring us to our knees. Together, our soldiers and our people will put up an indestructible wall of resistance.
The mourning and the testimony of the survivors would tell the rest.
We defend our unit. When the helicopter was coming down, we had to act, because otherwise, they would have taken our unit.
At 4 a.m., the streets were quiet. Once again, the Venezuelan people responded without falling for provocations. Despite the uncertainty, the Venezuelan people knew how to resist. It was another of the battles that Chavismo has had to face, perhaps the most difficult one.
Helicopters began to fly overhead. There was an explosion on the Mamo Plateau, and about 10 seconds later, there was a flash, and the building was blown up. What we did was help the neighbors, who were running for help and shelter, because they were bombing the entire plateau.
A resilience that has been built hand in hand between the military forces and the people in an unbreakable bond that once again was put to the test.
Las instrucciones del presidente Maduro han sido dadas.
President Maduro's instructions have been given. President Maduro's instructions are to get activated immediately, and the Minister of Defense, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, knows it, our Bolivarian National Armed Forces know it, the Venezuelan people organized in militias know it, and our citizen security agencies know that imperfect police and military fusion we go out to defend our homeland. No one will violate the historical legacy of our father liberator Simón Bolívar.
A defense that was activated in every home, in every neighborhood, but also in the various branches of the state. That outrage did not paralyze anyone, quite the contrary.
Él advirtió, si algo le ocurriese al presidente
He warned it that if anything happened to President Nicolás Maduro, the people would take to the streets activated. The militant groups would be at their workplaces activated, and the Bolivarian military forces would be activated throughout the national territory.
Like an omen, daybreak began to clearly reveal the desolation of the attack, to identify the victims, to gauge the extent of the offense, and also to spur the response of a dignified people. But Delcy's first words during that fatidical dawn still resounded in the air, thick with gunpowder, astonishment, and rage.
We immediately demand a proof of life of President Nicolás Maduro and the First Lady, the first combatant Cilia Flores.
But it was more than just a proof of life. It was a signal of victory in the Chavez style, which turned tears of anger into strength, to seal a complicit call to the Venezuelan people, who once again decided to rise up and continue.
And after this first chapter of the Signal of Victory, we have a short break coming up. Don't go away because we'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South, and let's go to Venezuela as the people continue the Great March for the release of President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores, expressing their commitment to sovereignty and freedom in Venezuela. Thousands of people representing several sectors of the Venezuelan society have been marching for a month to Plaza Venezuela in Caracas, demanding the release of the Bolivarian couple who were kidnapped by the United States Army on January 3rd and held since then in that country. As we've been informing in Venezuela, citizens continue to mobilize to demand the release of kidnapped President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady, and also Deputy Cilia Flores. Our correspondent Brian Mir is in Caracas and has more details. Hello, Brian. What can you share with us at this hour?
I'm standing in the middle of the largest demonstration that's been held in the 1 month since the United States government invaded Venezuela's territorial sovereignty and kidnapped Constitutional President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. There are literally tens of thousands of people here. In the 2 weeks since I've arrived, I've already covered 6 protests for teleSUR. This is the largest one by far, and what it shows is that, contrary to what many U.S. government officials might have thought, that their kidnapping of the elected President Maduro would somehow cause dissension, infighting within the ruling Socialist Party of Venezuela. Support is unified behind acting President Delcy Rodriguez, and the momentum keeps growing on the streets here in the city of Caracas and around Venezuela.
Thank you, Ryan, for all the first-hand information. We will keep for sure in contact with you throughout the day as Venezuelans are marking today 1 month of the terrorist attack on the nation on January 3rd. Now we go to other informations. Social movements around the world will hold as well as solidarity events with Venezuela today to mark the first month of imperialist aggression against the country, which killed over 100 people and resulted in the kidnapping of President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. On Tuesday, a global protest will take place at U.S. embassies as well in several countries, demanding the return of the presidential couple. These international expressions of solidarity support the demands of the Venezuelan people who have been taken to the streets for a month to urge the immediate release of the constitutional president and the First Lady and Deputy Cilia Flores. In this scenario, it is expected that around 74 acts of solidarity will take place on 4 continents throughout the day. And now we go to Russia. Solidarity groups, political parties, also government organizations came together in a massive rally in support of Venezuela. People braved the low temperatures this Tuesday at the Venezuelan embassy in Moscow to demand the release of President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Congresswoman Cilia Flores, who were kidnapped by the United States a month ago during the illegal criminal invasion of January 3rd. The large rally is part of international actions to promote respect for international humanitarian law and part of the Bring Them Back campaign. And now we have a second tour break coming up. Before, we want to invite you to tune in at 7 p.m. Caracas time, 6 p.m. Havana time, for a special interview with historian, former British ambassador and human rights activist Craig Murray, analyzing the impact a month after the U.S. military aggression on Venezuela and the kidnapping of President Nicolás Maduro Moros. Join us at 7 p.m. Caracas time here on teleSUR English. Final show break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. We go now to Cuba, where on Monday the National Assembly urged global parliamentarians to reject the extraterritorial measures imposed by the United States government against the Caribbean island. The International Relations Committee of the National Assembly of People's Power of Cuba issued an international call to denounce the recent escalation of U.S. unilateral sanctions, describing it as a new manifestation of the economic war aimed at suffocating the Cuban people. The members of the Commission condemned the executive order signed by the U.S. President and pointed out that Cuba is a peaceful country that has never supported terrorist actions. In this regard, the legislative document states that these actions undermine regional stability and violate the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace.
A la presidencia, a los diputados y a los que se encuentran de manera virtual.
In other news, on Tuesday, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum stated during her regular morning press conference that this week her government will send aid to Cuba despite the U.S.'s coercive measures against the Caribbean country. The Mexican president stated that in light of the threats by the United States to impose tariffs on anyone who sends crude oil to Cuba, directly or indirectly, they are seeking diplomatic channels to send petroleum to the island. In addition, the head of state ruled out tensions with the U.S. government over the decision to send aid to Cuban people. In this regard, Sheinbaum assured that the process will be transparent and properly reported. In this scenario, Claudia Sheinbaum reaffirmed that Cuba, as a sovereign nation, maintains trade relations with many countries and not only with Mexico, as the opposition claims.
Sino, pues, cuáles son las necesidades para poderlo enviar. Entonces, va a ser muy transparente y lo vamos a informar adecuadamente.
And now we go live to Venezuela once more. The people is taken to the streets massively 1 month after the U.S. terrorist actions against the nation, this military incursion against the nation, a sovereign Latin American nation that led to the kidnapping of President Nicolás Maduro Moros and also Congresswoman and First Lady Celia Flores. 1 month after, the people remains on the streets today more massively than ever to mark 1 month of this brutal siege, of this brutal attack and deadly attack against the nation that also left over 100 victims according to official reports, including 32 Cuban soldiers as well in this action. Today the people is united, demanding the release of President Nicolás Maduro and Celia Flores, demanding their safe return to their homeland, demanding the presence of their constitutional president at this hour in Venezuela. This is live images of this huge demonstration that it's approaching and walking down the main avenues of the capital Caracas, of the capital of Venezuela, that was one of the main targets of this aggression on January 3rd, in the very early hours of Saturday morning, just few days after the beginning and the celebration of a new year which Venezuelans received with so much hope. This came to create a huge commotion, but as the Venezuelan people have demonstrated throughout the years, this is a moment of certainty of what it is true and really valuable for Venezuelans, which is the protection of their homeland, which is as well the protection of peace, above all of the destabilizing actions against the nation, they are united, supporting as well the acting president Delcy Rodriguez and the Bolivarian government that has remained firm in the face of the destabilizing actions performed by the US, and also in the face of the brutal siege, of the brutal harassment and threat, and a declaration of war of the US empire in this moment. And with these informations that come at this hour from Caracas, Venezuela, we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media. This is all for the moment. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.